Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're here with another episode of the Darko Ages. Once again, it's been a little bit. We had the Labor Day holiday, the start of college football and NFL seasons. The group here has been a little busy, but we're excited to come back. And given the spirit of the fall, we're going to talk a little bit of football. Our team today is the 2022 Green Bay Packers. So we think a fitting entry into the Darko Ages series. They finished 8-9, and much like some of the other teams we've talked about, because they're a rival of the Lions, we've got some strong opinions on them. So we're excited to jump into that. We'll start, as always, Pat, how was your weekend?
Yeah, I actually had a busy weekend. I had to hop over to Oahu and look at where we lived before. We were renting, and the renters moved out, and so I went over to kind of wrap up things over there. So I got together with the Michigan alumni group that I used to watch games with over there, and we got to watch the depressing game against Oklahoma. Michigan got worked. But you guys were at a night game in East Lansing. Who consumed more alcohol between the two of you?
Oh, man.
That's a great question.
Zach.
No, get out of here. I woke up Sunday morning and Kenneth's lady friend was cooking some breakfast for us, which was very kind of her. And I was just like,
those were your wife's breakfast rolls for us. We just warmed them up.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Actually, a really clutch decision, Pat. So we had all this food for tailgate, and Alexis had sent Zach down with these like breakfast rolls, thinking that we could take those to tailgate, but we were like, you know what? These will probably be real clutch on Sunday morning. So we actually left them behind, delayed some gratification, and then we're feeling good when we got to eat them with little to no effort on Sunday morning.
It helped button me up a little bit. My gills are a little green Sunday morning.
Yeah, that plus some coffee got you ready to face that drive back to Traverse City.
Yeah, Kenny poisoned me though. That's
a lot of talk. But what did you guys think of the Spartans?
I
mean, what a win, right?
Yeah, they look good. We were kind of joking. It was probably just two mediocre teams that were battling it out, which is probably ultimately what both the teams' fate will be. But at the same time, it was nice to see Childs put together a good game. He scored. He was involved with every touchdown. I'm pretty sure he had 4 passing and 1 rushing. And then it's the same thing that Kenny and I talk about often, about not to go too long-winded here, but he just makes some incredible throws, just ridiculous throws, and then we'll just miss a guy that's wide open.
Consistency is king. I think winning games like that early in the season, though, I mean, sometimes it doesn't mean anything, but sometimes it can really be a springboard to like make your team better.
Yeah, it's what we're hoping for, because you assume you're going to beat Youngstown, depending on what Harbaugh gave them yesterday. But then we'd be 3-0 at that point, and that's a much better spot to be than 2-1.
We definitely don't have the time to go down that conspiracy. I will say, Zach, that regardless of whether we agree with that conspiracy or not, if somehow Harbaugh gave them the entire playbook, we still should not lose to Youngstown State. So if we lose, we got bigger problems than whether or not than what Jim's doing in Ohio.
The NFL even revolves around Michigan State football. Everyone's out to get you. It's a big conspiracy. Absolute dummies.
That's correct.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Pat, the game, it was a fun atmosphere. Tailgate is always fun. Good times with friends and all that. My brother and our friend Robbie actually were in Norman for that game. My brother had he didn't have a favorable report on the game. He said Norman was really cool. Everybody was really nice.
Yeah, that seemed to be the universal Michigan fan experience. That felt like at least we're good hosts. It's always funny though when you like opposing fans go somewhere, their team loses, and then the home fans were nice to them. But like, if the game had gone the other way, would the home fans have been so nice? Sometimes I'm not so sure, like maybe when you're leaving and like you kicked their ass on the road, like the home fans might not love you so much. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, this wasn't a home game, but I think I actually talked about this on one of the other pods. I was at the Big Ten championship game between Wisconsin and Michigan State. And it was just like a classic game that went right down to the wire. Both teams like legitimately were in it. And as we're walking out, all the Wisconsin fans are like, you guys played such a great game. That was so much fun. It's like, yeah, screw you guys. We're not here for you to be nice to us right now. We just lost an absolute heartbreaker and you're like congratulating us on our way out. But, I suppose there's a stereotype in there for people from Wisconsin, which is a good segue into the team we came here to talk about, the Green Bay Packers, who by all accounts, their fans can be very nice, and yet we still hate them because they are the biggest rival for the Lions. It probably goes neck and neck with the Bears, but the Bears have not been nearly as good. They've been much more like the Lions in terms of middling. So the Packers have always kind of felt like the bully, and I think that shared border in the UP and the west side of the state breeds. It's almost like a little bit of an in-state rivalry between the Packers and Lions. What are your guys' thoughts before we talk specifically about the team? Your thoughts on the rivalry and the Packers in general?
Yeah, in general, there's nothing that I can say that I enjoy about them. I can be complimentary that they constantly win, and maybe my hatred is just really the jealousy piece. I'll never get, there's a lot of Packers fans in this area that grew up in Michigan. I'll never totally understand that. And I think that's largely because the Lions have always stunk. But outside of that, no, I mean, I just can't stand. Can't stand the team.
Interesting, Kenny. You made the point that like people from Wisconsin are kind or could be gracious in victory. One thing that stands out about the Packers is that they've always had a head of their team and an image of not being very gracious winners. Like, I don't think of Favre and Rodgers as like Barry Sanders, where they score a touchdown and hand the ball to the ref. It's all about their celebrations, their Lambeau leaps, their rubbing it in. And so, I mean, for a long time, they had just dominated the Lions. And so it's easy to hate them. I do think one thing that I will kind of respect about the Packers is we grew up in Traverse City, Michigan. I think it'd be cool to think about like a professional NFL team in a smaller city. And then like the surrounding community, it feels a little bit more like the college football experience when you think of like a Lambeau and the way they tailgate and it draws in the whole region rather than, the big city typical NFL experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is cool that it's a small city, right? And that they exist there and they've thrived there, really. Just imagine, whatever, Ludington or something having a pro team. That'd be crazy. To kind of get back to the snootiness or the rubbing it inness of Packers fans, weren't they the team that really pushed to have the NFL ban the tush push too? Pretty sure if you were to Google that, you'd see that they were the ones whining about that led that charge.
I think they proposed the rule change, although I think the majority of the league also voted with them. I think it required like a super majority for it to pass. I don't know. We're way off topic. I gotta say, watching that Eagles Cowboys game on Thursday, they should just ban it. I'm just tired of watching it. Like I get from it's part of the game, but like it's just not fun or exciting to like watch every time it's third and two. They just line up and push the guy
to like how football used to be played.
Yeah.
So
it's just dumb.
It's just like about being able to get in there and move people off the ball and 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Yeah.
I mean, it is whatever. Like, I don't necessarily want him to ban it. I just, as an entertainment product, I'm like, I don't care about this. Let's go back to the Packers and specifically the 2022 Packers. So, as I mentioned at the outset, they're 8-9. We thought they were interesting for a few reasons. One, it was sort of a turning point in their franchise. We've done a few other sort of turning point teams. The first iteration of this pod, that Pistons team we did was a turning point. The Pacers team we did, in this case, this particular Packers team went 8-9, and their quarterback this year was Aaron Rodgers, future Hall of Famer. This is his last year with the Packers, and he moved on to the Jets and subsequently got hurt, and then also didn't have any success after he came back. So yeah, this was sort of a turning point, and we'll talk a little bit more about the history of the Packers and frankly how few quarterback transitions they've had. But let's go back just to 2022 for a second. What do you guys remember about this team other than Aaron Rodgers? And I think the obvious thing for us is we were competing with them as Lions fans. So what do you guys think about it from that 2022 NFL season? Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about Rodgers, unfortunately, because that's kind of the biggest thing to mention with any sort of Packers team from that era. but they had traded Devontae Adams, so there was maybe some doubts on who Rodgers was going to throw the ball to. But at the same time, he was coming off of back-to-back MVP seasons, right? So really what I remember about this team was like, oh, maybe this is the year that we can get them.
Yeah, I think it should be clear to the regular listeners of our podcast that we definitely have a Detroit sports bias. And we picked this team, Green Bay 2022. If you look at it, they went 8-9. That's their worst record, first losing record since 2018. It was also a year the Lions beat them twice with a kind of a famous victory in the final game of the season when the Packers still had a chance to make the playoffs and had a game in Lambeau that the national media, probably most Packers fans, just all considered a victory over Detroit, and probably Rodgers and the Packers themselves too, because they had done it so many times. And then Dan Campbell and the Lions went in there and beat them. So it's certainly memorable for us, but probably not so much for Green Bay fans.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of an interesting season, and I do sort of remember this narrative, right, of I think they were playing, they had drafted Jordan Love, and, famously, Aaron Rodgers was not happy about that, and Aaron Rodgers not one to be shy about letting people know what he thinks about his team's moves or, health topics, anything in particular. He's always willing to share his opinion. So I feel like there was kind of an understanding that, they might be in transition. How are things going to go for them? And if you look at their schedule, they played two overtime games. So, that's like right there. They won both of those in overtime. So they finished 8-9, like very easily could have just been 6-11. So, it wasn't a team that was great, but they lost their opener, won 3 in a row, then lost 5 in a row before sort of battling back to get to 8-8. And as Pat said, have a chance to win that last game of the season to make the playoffs. To get into, obviously, their passing leader, Aaron Rodgers, had an okay year. Certainly nowhere close to his former MVP seasons. He threw for 3,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, 12 INTs, a really solid season. They featured Aaron Jones, who I remember being a real thorn in the side of Lions fans, and also A.J. Dillon. And then, they had a lot of just young wide receivers that they had drafted in the drafts leading up to that. Zach, is there anything that stands out to you about the way they played, or does this just sort of blend into those Rodgers years? And, you mentioned Devontae Adams earlier. They didn't have anybody like that on the team, right?
Right, exactly. And that's sort of what stands out to me the most for this team compared to other years was that the pass offense and the rushing offense were just totally middle of the pack. They were like 15th and 17th ranked each in the NFL. So really just not that great. Aaron Rodgers didn't have the connection with those new receivers that you mentioned. Didn't have he famously was really a big believer in Devontae and had him move to other teams that he was going to, that sort of stuff. So he just didn't have that connection. And if you look at his season last year with the Jets, I don't think anyone would consider that a great season by Aaron Rodgers standards. And it's almost like a mirror image of his last season here in Green Bay. And that really kind of, to me, shows that as Rodgers went on the Packers with, high touchdown, low interception ratios, that's how their team went. Truthfully, they battled back because he's an all-time quarterback. He's a future Hall of Famer. They were able to start stringing wins together because of his greatness.
Yeah, and like I said, they were pretty middle of the pack. They were 14th in points for, 17th in points against. That's pretty much right in the middle of the league, right? So you put those together, you end up with an 8-9 record and a couple of overtime games. We should talk a little bit about how fun it was as Lions fans to have that last game, because the Lions that season had beat the Packers earlier in the season. Shout out to us as Lions fans. Always love to win. But, going into that game against Green Bay, they were 1-6. And so Dan Campbell, it was only his second year, so he wasn't quite on the hot seat, but there were definitely a lot of people being like, all right, when are we going to start to show some progress? And then, of course, they go on to win, I think like 6 of their last 8 games. They go 6-2 down the stretch to finish 9-8. And excuse me, they go 8-2 down the stretch to finish 9-8. And that sort of kicks off this little run that the Lions had for a couple of years that we'll talk about whether we're going to think that that's going to be able to keep going or not. So, yeah, I mean, we'll come back to Rodgers and talk a little bit more about his career, but I do think it's probably not unexpected that when we look back at the 2022 team, the players other than Rodgers are not particularly memorable because, as Zach said, the whole team was sort of built around that Aaron Rodgers personality and running an offense that was designed around him. I want to touch on Matt LaFleur because he was the coach of that team, and we were talking a little bit before we got started. I don't know that I personally realize exactly how successful he's been already in his career. Very clearly one of the better coaches from a wins-loss perspective and resume perspective thus far. Pat, what are your observations on LaFleur? I mean, we get to watch them play the Lions at least twice a year. What are your thoughts on him since he's taken over that team?
Yeah, I mean, when he took over, I kind of expected him not to be good. It's just like this super young guy out of nowhere that gets the job. And it didn't seem like it kind of seemed like maybe Rodgers wanted him to be the coach. So it's been interesting that he's been able to kind of transition to the post-Rodgers teams after this. Pride of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, went to like Saginaw Valley, I think. So he's a Michigan guy. And he's done a lot of winning. I think like 67% winning percentage in the NFL, which is very good. And hopefully that winning percentage goes down in the future.
Yeah, it's
Zach,
leading up to the 2022 season, he was 39-10. So that's just, it's a pretty absurd start to your career. I remember people always tack that on to Rodgers, which, has some fairness to it. But I think at this point, LaFleur's shown he doesn't need Rodgers to win. They went, 11-6 last year. So he's just a good coach. There's no question about it.
Yeah. I mean, probably just via osmosis in some of those Mount Pleasant bars in the mid 2000s, maybe just picked up some football knowledge. Zach, what do you think?
I believe that my football knowledge exceeds even that of Matt LaFleur's. No, that can't possibly be true. Do you figure he's up on the Beale City scandal, the unknown number?
Unknown number, yeah, probably.
I don't know. Do you think coaches watch any Netflix during the season? Probably not. It's probably all.
It's like 15 minutes away.
Just to put a bow on it. So his first year as a coach, they go 13-3. Second year, 13-3. Third year, 13-4. As Zach noted, I think, the common belief was, that's a lot of Rodgers. They have the 8-9 season that we just talked a little bit about. And then he goes 9-8 and 11-6. And, 11, they were in a lot of those games last year, those 6 losses. So yeah, they've been really good since he took over. So, let's get into the Aaron Rodgers conversation a little bit. And I remember the first NFL team we talked about sort of those late 90s, mid 90s quarterbacks that we grew up watching, the Elways and Marinos and Steve Youngs. Very weird for me to think about Aaron Rodgers in that class. And I'll just ask you guys, do you guys think he's setting aside our personal feelings about him, do you guys think he's in that class of he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I guess the question is he in that like upper class of some of the greats of all time, or is he, a Hall of Fame quarterback who isn't quite at that level?
Yeah, 4 MVPs, I think, is really kind of where that conversation starts and ends, right? Including back-to-back ones. The one Super Bowl, I suppose, is a knock, but he still won one. So, he has more MVPs than Joe Montana. So I think that's probably worth noting too.
Yeah, I think he's right up there in the conversation with the greatest of all time. There's not many guys whose resume stacks up and looks better than his. I think he's clearly, it'd be interesting to have a Packers fan on and ask them, but I think he had a better career than Favre, who was more of like a sling it, bomb it gamer, but he would throw picks, whereas Rodgers just did a lot of winning. Now, some of it was like also the modern offenses, like Rodgers, when he those first Green Bay offenses, they were just so hard to beat. They spread you out, and he flung the ball around. A lot of he's amazing use of his arm angles, so he can throw over the top, throw all those sidearm stuff, and he was pretty nimble, so he could evade the rush and throw accurately on the move. So all things that I think like really set him apart.
Yeah, that movement definitely stands out to me again as a Lions fan. He was the classic guy that you feel like you've got him, and he's not like Mike Vick out there, right? Like he's not running away from linebackers,
fast.
But he just had that sense of that presence of knowing when to get out of the pocket, and was fast enough that he could get 10 or 12 yards if the field was opened up for him. But yeah, the precision stands out. It's just sort of felt like you said, it felt like Favre was sort of that more classic. They had really good running games, and he could really beat you with those downfield throws. Whereas Rodgers, it honestly just seemed like their offense was line up in shotgun, have him diagnose the defense, figure out where the soft spot was, and just pick people apart. Of course, he had the arm strength; he could make those bigger throws too. So I agree. His record with the Jets at the end of his career notwithstanding, he had basically 2 losing seasons. His rookie year, they went 6-10. They were 6-9-1 in 2018. But other than that, his wins are like 11, 10, 14, 13, 13, 13. Yeah, he one of the all-time greats, begrudgingly, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, he's won pretty much twice as much as he's lost. His career record is 154 and 87, And yeah, I can picture if I were to picture Rodgers, sort of his quintessential throw, it was him sort of doing that. He would have like this sort of half jog when he got out of the pocket, and then he would do this little fling, running to the right, and just a little boop, and it's, a 30-yard pass to Adams or Jordy Nelson or something like that.
Yeah, and I think when he first started, he wasn't as hateable or loathsome. He seemed like he was trying to prove himself after taking over for Favre. But then, after all his MVPs, and I think famously it was like 2014 or something like that when Packers started mediocre, and he told all the Packers fans to relax, like, we got this. And then they went on some crazy run and won their last 8 games or something. And so you kind of had that sense where he was just so cocky and confident about their success and how good he was that he kept following through on it. So as a rival fan, it just you get tired of it, and you just want to beat that guy when they're that arrogant and that confident.
And, he also had the famous quote. He was like, I own the Bears. And I think he had won, like 8 of the last 10 versus them, or 9 of 10 or something like that. So, I think that's been a bit of a theme that we've touched on with athletes that have annoyed us as rivals, that if you win consistently, you kind of earn the right to talk that talk. I think it's not so much his football talk that irritates me. It's all the other stuff. He has become sort of almost like a meme unto himself, of just like, it's sort of the classic thing that is in the culture now, of the people who are like, because they've convinced themselves that just because they are contrarian, that they must just be smarter, that like no one else is smart enough to see the world the way that they do. And, that stuff drives me nuts. And I was already predisposed to dislike the guy. So, he's been very annoying to me personally for 4 to 5 years, but I can appreciate his talents. And I will say the other thing I was going to mention is, as you were talking, Pat, I mean, recall there was a lot of sympathy for him because he was one of the first guys in the NFL to like go to the draft and then just drop precipitously. That's how the Packers ended up with him late in the first round. And then he has to sit behind Favre. And I think, by all accounts, Brett Favre also not a great guy. So that might not have been a pleasant experience. So yeah, it was, he started it off with a little bit of sympathy in that regard. Anything else we need to say about him, or should we move on? Oh, I did have one last thing. Since we were talking about the tush push earlier, I got to get another takeoff on plays. I was thinking about it because he had these signature Hail Marys, particularly against the Lions. I think the Hail Mary is the most overrated play in sports. It's just like random and luck. Don't get me wrong. It's the opposite of my take on the tush push. It's exceptionally exciting and like fun to watch, right? Like you just heave it down there. But I will go to my deathbed thinking that Aaron Rodgers wasn't good at Hail Marys. He just got lucky 3 times or whatever on the million that he threw. I just don't believe it's like a skill play. And I say that as someone, as a Michigan State fan who saw an awesome Hail Mary, but like the ball just careened into Keith Nichols' arms. So anyway, I'm out on Hail Marys. That's my take.
Yeah, I mean, Hail Marys are awesome. You just out on using it to say you're good. Like it's called a Hail Mary. It's a prayer. It's lucky if it works. So yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you can't be like, oh, another Hail Mary. I'm dominant. I'm the best. Like, why'd you need a Hail Mary to win? Like, be better the rest of the game, so you don't need to lob it up there.
Clearly the Rodgersian take would be contrarian to this, so I'll take that stance on this. Definitely, it's a practice play. Clearly, he's good at them because he kept succeeding at them. You guys just don't see it the right way.
Yeah. Well, as I want to say, Aaron, if you hear this and you want to come on, we can chat. Or if you want to talk about this random pod you listen to where we took some shots at you on the Pat McAfee show, be our guest. Like, go for it,
feel
man.
Free.
We won't.
Feel free.
We
Bring
won't complain. So, as always, this was a bit of an excuse in one sense to talk about the Lions, but what the real genesis of this pod, we're gonna kind of finally get to the point here, is when we were talking. The last pod we did was the Seattle SuperSonics, and their team moved to Oklahoma City. And we were sort of chatting afterwards. Well, one of the things we talked about on that pod was the Sonics color scheme, that like green and yellow was remarkably similar to the Packers. Funny that once you take the Packers out of it, we're like, that actually looks kind of cool. But we were talking about ownership and the role that owners play, and what do owners owe the communities they where their teams play, and it got us talking about the Packers. And, one of the things that is just legitimately really cool is that they don't have a traditional owner. And we wanted to dig into that a little bit. So, before we dug into it, like, what did you guys know just in a, sort of without doing any research about how the Packers were structured? Do you remember that like being a topic as we were watching them as we were growing up?
I've always been vaguely aware that they didn't have a traditional ownership structure. And you would hear about people who were like investors in the Packers. I thought it was like a business where people, they had shares and shareholders. That's not really how it is after doing some research, but that was my understanding, which I thought, was pretty cool, that people in the community could own a piece of the team.
Yeah, agreed. Go ahead, Zach.
Any broadcast, any TV broadcast that they're doing from a field or whatever, that's the top thing. It has to be the top 1 and top 3 things they talk about. Well, it's the team that's owned by the city. The Packers fans are so passionate. It's like, well, they're not any more passionate than any of their fan base. Like, come on. They just happen to throw money at it willy-nilly.
Yeah, but there are some cool aspects to it, right? Like, Kenny, maybe you did a little bit more research than me on this, but basically, they do funding rounds and people can invest. You're not going to get any dividend. It's structured as a nonprofit. So all their revenue goes back into making the team better, or the facilities, or the fan experience, or all those things about the team. If you do invest, you do get to vote, not like for who the GM is, but like I think for who's on kind of like a board of directors and that run the team, that choose kind of the football people that then do those things. And this is a grandfathered in situation. So the NFL will not allow another team to like sell shares to the local community. But part of their like charter is that the team can, like, the only way they could move the team, I think, is with unanimous vote from all of the shareholders. So basically, once you have a bunch of local people, that's impossible. So it is cool that unless the franchise like went bankrupt or something, or the NFL went out of business, like the Green Bay Packers will always be in Green Bay. they'll never become the Los Angeles Packers.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, just to add a little bit, I mean, I went through and looked at, they have done a few different fundraising rounds specifically to do renovations in recent years, to renovations to Lambeau Field. They had done some when they initially started the structure just because the team was close to insolvent. So that was their mechanism at the time. But then, as Pat said, they sort of maintained the structure and have used it as a way to finance improvements, which is like a direct tie into what we talked about with the Sonics, right? Where the big sticking point, unless you believe that Clay Bennett, just really wanted to move the team to Oklahoma City, was a new arena, right? And this is sort of like a creative way to say, if fans of the team want their money to go towards stadium improvements because they really love the team, this is a way for them to do it. Which I personally think is cool. It's like, it's a lot more transparent. Nobody is like forcing the taxpayers to buy into the latest round of renovations. It's just strictly something that if you're a fan of the Packers and you want to have a piece of, be a part owner, this gives you a vehicle to do it. But as Pat mentioned, I mean, they make it very clear if you actually like read through the documents that, not only are you never going to receive income from your investment, they are not transferable outside the family. I believe you can pass them down to like your children or spouse, but you can't like sell them for any amount of money. And they limit the number that any one person can own. So you can't even, so like some rich guy who lives in Wisconsin can't even be like, I'm going to buy, 30% of the shares so that I can do it. Like it is designed specifically to just sort of be a neutral community ownership structure, which, yeah, go ahead, Pat.
No, I think it's pretty brilliant for the community to have the investment in their own sports franchisee. So why does the NFL then explicitly not allow that, or any other pro sport explicitly not allow that for any other team? The Packers got grandfathered in. They've been a wildly successful franchise that clearly makes a lot of money for the NFL, helps it grow. I mean, arguably, they're number one. I mean, I don't know what you would argue. The Cowboys, the Patriots, the Packers. So this iconic brand that has this unique structure that has been so successful, that structure part of their success.
Yeah, like let's come back to that in just one second, because I just want to say, I mean, I think as always, and as we talked about on the Seattle pod, the answer is now, as much as we think about these teams as our teams and our community's teams, they're investment vehicles, right? Like the NFL owners who run the league can't afford to allow for creative ownership structures because they want control, and they also want to be able to sell their franchises sometime down the road, when they die or whatever, before they die, to recoup their investment. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they've gone in another direction, and it's just, because the model now has made it very clear that the owners own the team, the community doesn't.
Do you really think if I don't know the owners of many NFL teams, but if Jerry Jones on the Cowboys decided he wants out, he wants to sell the Cowboys, do you really think he would get a lower price by just making it like a publicly traded company sold to Dallas Cowboys fans than he would get on the closed market selling to other billionaires or groups of billionaires? Like, I think you could actually make more money. So the current owners, I'm not sure why they care about if the next guy who buys the team, you know what I mean? Like, they should only be self-interested in what's best for them. And so that's what's confusing to me. I might be missing something about the business side of it, but
yeah, well, I mean, I think it's probably partially about control, right? I mean, if like, maybe, I don't know how, now that it's banned, I don't know how, okay, so like, say the current owner, she's a Sheila Hamp Ford, right? So say she decides the rest of her kids don't, I mean, this is a bad example because the Fords have made it pretty clear they want to retain the team, like, through their kids and grandkids and all that. But, like, could the people of Michigan try to organize themselves? Yeah, maybe. But I guess this is the cynical view is like, yeah, maybe that would be good for the Ford family, but now there's no one billionaire that gets to own it as a future investment vehicle, right? So now it becomes publicly owned, right? Like, why don't we have any other like publicly owned signature assets like that, right? So, I mean, you're right. Maybe if you tried to create some sort of creative structure to allow the citizens of a state to come together, they could put together a competitive bid. I don't know how you would even organize it. It's probably not like realistic other than because the way this was already structured. But then, where do all these billionaires invest all their billions?
Yeah, well, and you go back to what you said earlier about financing a new stadium, and so many times taxpayers end up on the hook for that anyway. It's like, well, I'm a fan. I have season tickets. I want to ensure my team stays here. I want equity in the team. And like, even if it's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage, that seems like it would be extremely attractive to a lot of people. And like the law of large number, like you just get enough people and they don't have to invest that much individually. And then you do it like the Packers, like no one person can have, a majority control. You have a board of governors and you run the team. And like then each city would have its team locked in and wouldn't ever have that threat of them leaving. I mean, I think that would be good. I don't see how it would be bad for the sport and for the fans. It could be bad in some ways for revenue. Like I could see the NFL saying like, well, we want the flexibility to be able to make cities bid to pay for our stadiums.
Right. I mean,
and threaten to leave and have this monopoly on so I could see that. But when I think about it from a fan perspective, I think it would make it better. Zach, maybe how are any like the European soccer clubs, like the smaller clubs, are any of those like co-ops or publicly owned?
I'm sure they are. I couldn't think of one off the top of my head though. Like if you were to get into like the 5th and 6th division of English soccer or something, I'm sure it's a community supported team. But even Wrexham would be the kind of the easiest example to talk off the top of my head. They were 4th-ish division when they were purchased by Rob and what's his face, Rob McElhenney and
Reynolds.
The other guy. But they were privately owned prior to that, right? Because those teams are still super profitable, and that one person can control it. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure there are.
So I do wonder that that rule of large numbers. So the last time, and it's not apples to apples because they were trying to raise a specific amount, right? But the last sale of stock that the Packers did, they raised $65 million and added 176,000 new shareholders. They sold a little more than each share was worth was sold for $300. They sold 216,000 shares, raise that $65 million. The last NFL team to sell was the Commanders for $6.505 billion in 2023. Like 100x the Packers raised. Now, would people be willing to pay pay more than 300? Probably. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands you would get.
That's why this model doesn't exist anymore, right, Kenny? Because it'd be foolish to just, you'd have to really love a team to like take a second mortgage out on your house to give them more money when you're not going to see a profit realized after it, right? And that's largely why.
If you change the structure so you could get dividends to the shareholders and just make it
that's why they wouldn't want to do that though. The NFL wouldn't allow other teams to do that. Because that's you're opening yourself up to so much more sort of scrutiny and oversight from government committees and Sarbanes-Oxley.
Yeah, once it's for profit, it does become much more complicated, right? And I mean, I think the value of the $300 price is that it's low enough that it's attainable, right? It's a small enough amount of money that you don't need to have a quote unquote return. you're doing it because you're a fan. And you get to, they host like a big annual meeting and party, which for $300 sounds like it'd be kind of fun, right? You get to go hang out with all the other Packers fans, vote on the board of directors who do have some say in the direction of the franchise. So you do sort of feel like you have at least some small input into the decision making. So I guess that's maybe a good segue because Pat kind of touched on it, right? But I do think, setting aside whether it could be replicated, I do think we should talk about whether we think it gives the Packers a competitive advantage in terms of how they are run to sort of have this board of directors approach. They obviously, the board of directors hires an actual president or CEO of football operations who has complete autonomy up until the board decides to let him go. They have a general manager. So, in terms of building out the front office, once you get past that point, but there is no owner who that president has to answer to. There's a collection of board. And Pat kind of touched on the Packers being one of the signature franchises. And I'd add, despite being in by far the smallest market in the league, right? It is really because of their success and their history that they are considered one of the marquee franchises in the league. So, I don't know, Zach, what do you think? Like, do you think that the results kind of speak for themselves, that there's something to the way the Packers are set up that sort of gives them a bit of a leg up on their competition? What do you think?
Yeah, and I believe you guys were chatting about this earlier, and maybe it was a little lost on me, but if you're thinking about any sort of TV revenue and all the extra, hot dog sales or beer sales or whatever it might be, if you don't have a sort of singular owner that's going to be able to make profit off that themselves, all of that money just gets reinvested into the team. I think that gives you sort of an extra edge over every other team in a sense, right?
Yeah. So I think about this in terms of the NBA, and there's some current news and stories about Steve Ballmer and the Clippers, and potentially, going outside the salary cap use inducements to pay Kawhi Leonard. But when Ballmer bought the Clippers, a lot of the talk in NBA circles was he has more wealth than the collective valuation of the league. So people said, well, it's going to be a competitive advantage because he can run the Clippers at a loss. And compared to who he took over the franchise for, Donald Sterling, who was known for, it's in direct contrast, was known forever to focus on the profit yearly and not care about whether they had a winning team or not. So he was primarily concerned with, am I making money? And so you can have this whole range of owners with different priorities. Winning on one hand, we would like to think that that's all the owner thinks about. Certainly, they're also invested in their own wealth and how much money they can make. And so depending on how much money they have, like maybe they bought the team, they leveraged themselves to do it. One of their other businesses isn't going as well. All of a sudden they're like, well, I don't want to spend money on this or that, or this extra, analytic person, or this extra thing that makes the players' lives better, or nutrition, or whatever it might be. So you're going to have different franchises have different levels of investment in everything that can help the team be successful. And I think if you have a structure where you take away that owner piece, and now you have a board of governors who are just there to make sure that it's solvent, right? Like you're not losing money in a way that you wouldn't be able to survive, and then building a winner. You also aren't just like at the whims of a owner who makes weird decisions. Like having a group instead of one person is usually just better for decision making. Like, right. How do we evaluate? Like, so I know Zach's feelings about Jim Harbaugh. The way he got pushed out in San Francisco was incredible to me. He went there. They went from bad to immediately good. He goes to a Super Bowl, and then like the following season they go, I don't know, 9-7 or 8-8 or something. But that whole year there was all sorts of reports of turmoil between the coach and the owner and the GM, like those three. And the owner was always involved in that. And I have a friend who's a huge Niners fan, and he was like, I can't believe we're going to fire Jim Harbaugh. Like, he turned our team around. He doesn't hate, like, the fans don't care about the relationship with the owner. They care about the product on the field and how good the team is. So sure, your personalities don't mesh. Now with the Packers, it's harder to imagine that situation, right? Like you have a whole group of people who say like, well, we have to evaluate based on how well these people are doing at their job, not how much I like them or whether they were like rubbed me the wrong way personally and I felt offended. So they're out of here.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I totally agree. I think a couple things. I think over time, the financial aspect of it may or may not have played a bigger role. I think in the modern NFL, I think almost all these NFL teams are profitable, right? Because of all of this. So I don't know that now. I don't know how transparent the teams are about like whether owners are reinvesting all of those profits back into the team, right? Or whether they are keeping some of that as a return on their investment. But given how much money the teams are making and the salary cap structure, I don't know that in recent years the financial aspect of it would play as big of a role.
I don't know, Kenny. I guarantee you there are owners that look at their payroll and they think their ego tells them they have to be paid more than all those guys, maybe all those guys combined yearly. Like if the team is making so much and I'm paying all this money to all these guys, I'm important. I want my pay. I guarantee you a lot of them are taking out of the coffers that could be reinvested in the team.
I mean, there are a few teams that anecdotally are still viewed as being somewhat cheap, right? You've had like the Bengals that were in this situation with their negotiating with T. Higgins. So, maybe it does happen more than I think. And there's probably some teams, but I do think there are some teams where the owners are able to sort of get past that and let the team financially run. I think the big thing though is the personality side of it that you talked about of these owners who made all of their money or because because of how successful they were, they sort of just view themselves as experts, right? And, I mean, the obvious example right now, Jerry Jones just traded Micah Parsons, right? Because he felt like he was asking for too much money and everybody in the league is like, what are you doing? The guy's, the best pass rusher in the league. You got 2 late first round picks and Jerry Jones is the classic one because he has made it very clear that he is making all of these decisions. Various teams have various levels of, control, right? There are other owners who apparently are much more hands off. Although when it comes to, signing that marquee quarterback, the owners absolutely have to be signing off on those major deals, right? So I do think that stability that you talked about and the ability to sort of take the ego out of it to some extent and not feel like you've got to be at the whims of this one person probably takes some of that pressure off for the Packers management team.
This is maybe unrelated, but I think there's a strong comparison there. During the bad run for Michigan football, we had athletic director named Dave Brandon, who was like fabulously wealthy for being the Domino's CEO for a while. And then he came to Michigan and he hired Brady Hoke and was famously like had a big ego about how smart he was for hiring Brady Hoke. And then there were stories about like when the team was struggling, like Dave Brandon in the film room with the coaches and the team. And it's just like, what is he contributing? He's
right.
has no football. Like he's not. Like that's not his career. Why is he in there? And I think you're absolutely right. When you're the owner, it's your thing. You want to be involved. And being involved like that is probably a net negative because you are not as good as people that's what their entire career is and what they're focused on the competition. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that ego thing is probably a huge part of it.
Yeah, maybe he just wanted to see their turtle charts and what their inputs and outputs were to make an assessment on their performance, right? That's just classic sort of CEO jargon. This will be the way to motivate them.
Yeah, I'll get in there and film study and see what we're doing wrong.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get a little. So just to circle back on something you asked me earlier, and I actually didn't know this, but Manchester United is a publicly traded soccer club. You can buy Man U stock on the New York Stock Exchange right now. So didn't know that, but smaller clubs like Detroit FC, DCFC is a community-owned team, and Kenny, in your own backyard, Lansing Common is community-owned as well.
Really? Man, maybe I should become an investor. The Lansing football team is on a long list of Lansing sites and things that Zach always complains about how we never go visit any of them when he comes down to visit. We just like hang out at my house and then like I don't know, get Little Caesars or something.
No lies.
You guys are set in your ways of Friday, Saturday tailgate, Sunday recovery.
You got to do it.
So
go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we kind of skipped over setting the stage. We jumped right into the conversation, but, I mentioned that, so Green Bay, just some stats to talk about this argument. Green Bay has the most wins of any other NFL franchise. In some parts, that's because they've been around the longest, but they are like second or third in winning percentage too. Yeah, sorry, they are third. Baltimore is first. Baltimore obviously has only been around for a couple decades, so much smaller sample size, though they have been quite well run and had just a ton of continuity across their teams, which is probably a bit of a theme there. The Cowboys are second all-time in winning percentage. Obviously, the 90s and the early part of the Jerry Jones era played a role in that, so we were just taking some shots at him, but he obviously had some success, though results have been a lot more mixed lately in terms of getting back to the Super Bowl. The Packers are third, a 572 winning percentage, but since 1990 they've only had 6 losing seasons. They've made the playoffs 18 times. And they've had now essentially 3 quarterbacks in the time that we have been fans of them, right? They had Favre, Rodgers, and then Jordan Love. So pretty impressive. Good. Thanks for that catch. In the time that we have been fans of the Lions. So yeah, I mean, I think, like obviously when you have one team that has this structure and they're successful, it's a little hard to draw like any real conclusion out of it, but it's clearly worked for them in a way that is pretty cool when we set aside our own personal feelings about them. Yeah, I mean, What do you guys think? Like who in your opinion, who's the NFL franchise that, at least since we've been fans, was just like they're it?
I mean, it's kind of easy to say the Patriots, but they stunk when we were kids, right? It really does have to be the Packers, or maybe
Cowboys, 49ers, Patriots.
The 49ers were kind of always consistently good too.
See, I always think of the Steelers.
The Steelers, yeah,
just
Tomlin's
consistently good.
Good.
Couple Super Bowls in there. I mean, the 49ers and Cowboys just own the 90s. That sort of that, like, when we were kids, signature time for us watching the league. Those battles between the Cowboys and 49ers in the playoffs. You had Dion and Jerry Rice and Michael Irvin. Those were some fun football games. Have you guys watched the Cowboys doc, out of curiosity, that's on Netflix? We're too busy with Unknown Number.
Great though. I've heard it's awesome.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. It does look cool. Anything else we want to say about the Packers? Big picture?
Big picture, or just say in general? Because I've got. Well,
we should talk a little bit about the game this on Sunday and how we're feeling, as much as we don't want to. But before we do that, anything left to say on the Packers aside from the most recent iteration?
I think we did pretty good on this pod because we had talked about doing it prior to the game. And then the game went how it went, and we haven't been too salty, I don't think. So
yeah, I was a lot more excited to talk about this game, thinking of how Sunday might go, and Sunday went kind of the opposite of what happened, what I wanted. Well, so I was just like, ugh.
Zach, I feel like your expectations have been lower, I think, than the rest of ours the last couple of weeks. You've been skeptical of their ability to. So maybe you were slightly more prepared for it than we were, but you still sound a little depressed. I mean, it's week one, as we talked a little bit over text. The concern is that the reasons for concern kind of were the reasons they lost, right? Which is a little bit frightening. But teams can improve. I think we talked Baltimore started the season 0-2 last year, right? And the Lions have occasionally looked bad under. I mean, I still remember 2 years ago, the year they went to the NFC title game, where we kind of thought we got off to a good start, and then the Ravens just completely annihilated us, and we're just like, oh man, maybe this was all smoke and mirrors. So I think it's going to be a big week. Like they need to show some improvement, in my opinion, going into this game at home against the Bears.
Yeah, that was the issue, though, is that there was nothing easy in that game for the Lions, and we just watched 2 years of making easy plays, wide open wide receivers,
but
gashing rushing lanes.
Making things look easy on the road at Lambeau and when the Packers are good, I mean, is not very likely. It kind of reminds me of all the Michigan fans who think we're like Michigan's like downright bad after losing to Oklahoma on the road at night. Like, were we really going to win? Like, unless you're like a top 4 national title contender, like you don't win those road games against like a traditional power at night with a true freshman QB. So like, that's kind of how I felt about the Lions. We have new starters on the offensive line. We have guys, coming back from like Hutchinson wasn't very effective. Is that how he's going to be the whole season? Or do we just look at like, oh, he was pretty good before he got injured and let's just give him some time? Like, I think that I trust Dan Campbell and the Lions culture that they're going to be okay. Like maybe they're a worse team than they were last year, or the last 2 years, but I don't think that one game at Lambeau to start the season, one game sample size is a like huge cause for concern.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree. Like I said, it's if they had played a little better and lost, I would be 100% like, okay, road games are hard to win in the NFL, especially when you're going against another team that is a legitimate Super Bowl contender, right? It's just that, man, they ran for 47 yards or something like that. It was like that stuff. They have, even in losses, they have generally been able to get the running game going. But teams aren't static, right? And I do think some of those young offensive linemen, I think it's fair to, I don't even think you have to be irrationally hopeful. I think it's reasonable to expect that they're going to get better as the season goes along. And I think we also sometimes think at it too. I mean, I think they can get better too, right? As play callers and as understanding their schemes. Now, I think it's going to be, Ben Johnson, the Bears lost in hilarious Bears fashion last week, but he looked like he had at least scripted out good plays for Caleb. Whether Caleb Williams can execute those is another question. But, given how good they were, I think it's fair to expect that the offense will take a little bit of a step back. But they were the best offense in the league last year, right? So if they're the 7th best offense in the league, that will be a step back, but there will still be a path to them being in the mix when we get to December and January. Yeah, Zach.
If we're a top 7 offense at the end of the season, I'm buying you guys both steak dinners. There's no chance we're gonna be a top 7 offense.
All right.
You think there's too many holes on the offensive line? That's why.
Yeah, too many holes. I don't think John Morton is a creative individual that can fashion a good offense to beat defensive coordinators.
Yeah. I mean, it's a reasonable concern. I guess we'll find out. I mean, the good news is this is literally recorded. So
yeah. I mean, you have a 1 game sample that supports that. So, I mean, maybe that's true. I do think there's definitely reasons for optimism. Like, you just look at not even just young offensive line making their first start, but on the road, like, makes it so much harder. It's loud. It's hard to communicate. Like, things are hard out there. You can only rep stuff so much. Maybe there's a little bit of a story there about utilizing the preseason a little more than teams seem to do, because a lot of times they go in these first games and don't look very ready for everything. I mean, the Vikings won on the road at Chicago, but the first 3 quarters looked very, very rough.
Yeah.
And they were able to turn it around, but like, it's such a small sample size, right? So you think about the Lions looking rough. Maybe Green Bay is like really good. One of the is a top 5 defense. So many things we don't know at this point, to just make like sweeping conclusions, I think is like an overreaction. Now, if they would have gone on the road and won, I think I'd be saying kind of the same thing. Like, I don't think it means that they're the greatest team ever or anything like that. It's just things happen week to week in the NFL.
I think the game unders, the totals were like 10-2 or something like that this past weekend. The defenses across the league did seem to be a little bit ahead of the offenses. I do think it's kind of an interesting test case to kind of the old debate about coaching versus talent, right? Because an offense with Amon-Ra and Gibbs and Sewell and Goff and Laporta, like, even if the play calling is just like league average, that should be a good offense. Whether it'll be top 7, I don't know, maybe they're 10th or 11th or something, but they should not be as bad as they were in this game. But I also think that I'm definitely guilty of this because I just, like, it's so easy for us to focus on the quarterback play because we see that all the time. But I think that the O-line play, I think continuity is a much bigger thing than we realize, because we sort of just think like you're just lining up and smashing the guy in front of you. And it's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, I know, I feel like D'Antonio used to talk about this with the Spartans, that like their offensive lines, obviously their best offensive lines had great talent, but it was also like guys that had really been playing together. And even, the 2013 team that went on to be really good, the first like 3 or 4 weeks of the season, the offense just really struggled. They didn't get any push. So, football's it's a long season. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that Dan and the culture he's built will right the ship. It is a big week though, man. 0-2. We won't be feeling good. Anything else?
A couple notes just about the Packers. The 2022 team. They really relied just on one star, and that was kind of their undoing a bit, right? And maybe the Packers at some point shouldn't have relied on a previous star, Randall Woodfield. You may know Randall Woodfield as the I-5 killer. He's a serial killer. Packers are the only NFL team to have a serial killer on their roster. So cheers to the Packers. Good job, guys, on having them and doing the background checks and all that sort of good stuff. The I-5 killer, Randall Woodfield.
Do you have a outro thing planned to play on the I-5 killer?
No, I don't, but I will say that anytime you're in your sound deprivation chamber, you can always hear the Darko Ages.
Yes, I love it, Zach. That might be the best one yet. Well, I think we're about to do a spin-off true crime pod about the I-5 killer. Had never heard about this before, and this was a lot of fun as always. And I'm really proud that even though we mostly kept our Packers hatred in check, we closed it out by Zach accusing them of housing a serial killer on their team. That's that was a great way to wrap things up. You got any other fun facts, Zach, or that one?
No, it's not really a fun fact. It's pretty well known, but George Hollis, the Bears owner and founder, basically hired Lombardi for the Packers. That's just sort of a weird history tidbit.
All right, but you're not accusing George Hollis of being a serial killer, right? Yeah, okay.
Seems like probably didn't work out great for the Bears.
No, right? Yeah. Kept Vince. All right, guys. Well, this was fun. We'll have to try to do this a little more frequently again. I feel like we took a little bit longer of a break than we intended, but it was summertime, so sometimes you just gotta roll with it. Pleasure as always. Yeah.
Kenny, what do you think about doing like asking people that listen if they've got a team they would like us to talk about? Maybe.
Absolutely. For all the listeners, leave a comment or hit us up on Twitter. I gotta say, I was actually playing hockey last week or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember now. I was sitting there in the locker room, and one of the guys came in and he was like, "Hey man, do you do like a soccer podcast?" And I was like, well, we did one podcast about soccer. Shout out Steve if you're listening again. He great guy. I wasn't like texting him the information, but he saw the reel on Instagram and said he listened to, quote, a little bit. I didn't take that to mean the whole thing, but we'll take what we can get. I don't think he's much of a soccer fan.
We'll take it.
So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that's a good idea. If anybody's got ideas, we have talked a little bit with our friend Paul about doing another MSU team. But if any other guests want to come on, I know we have some fans of other teams. So yeah, let us know. We're always willing to accommodate. So, all right, guys, this was fun as always. Yeah, talk to y'all later, and thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe.
Later.
Like and
See y'all.
subscribe.